Shalom, this is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest discussions, particularly vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, but also from a broader perspective, Iran, Syria, Yemen, and more, let's first turn to introduce our experts for today, to include from the top left, starting there with Mr. Amir Oren, our TV7 editor-at-large. Next to him, Colonel in Reserve Miri Eisen, a senior fellow at ICT at Reichman University in Herzliya, as well as a former advisor of the Prime Minister's office. And last but not least, Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, who formerly served as a chief of intelligence at Mossad, among a long list of others. We won't go into your entire curriculum vitae, General, since we don't have enough time for that. But nonetheless, we'll start with Mr. Oren. Oren, it's good seeing you. And I'd like to ask you, particularly President Donald Trump last night said that unless Hamas accepts a final draft of a proposal, it's only going to get worse for Hamas. But Hamas apparently is unimpressed by the American leader and has this morning reportedly rejected the offer, saying they're not going to accept anything less than an end to the Israeli campaign with a full withdrawal.
So, Jonathan, we have to start with what is happening within the Gaza Strip as the IDF forces keep fighting there. They keep blowing up tunnels and they encounter resistance. The IDF has taken casualties, both killed and wounded over the last several days and weeks. And Israel is still paying the price of these operations without the end in sight yet. Now, what President Trump apparently referred to is basically a return to the second phase of what his envoy, Steve Witkoff, tried to implement last March. As you remember, on the very last day of the Biden term, January 19th, the plan for a two-phase or perhaps three-phase ceasefire was accepted by Israel and Hamas. The first phase was indeed implemented, but ahead of the second phase, some 42 days later, Israel decided to break it and went ahead with a new campaign, Gideon's Chariots, under the new Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir. Now, from that time on, almost 4 months, Israel has suffered more than 20 fatalities in Gaza. No additional hostage has been released. And now we are back to square one under the Witkoff outline. Apparently, Hamas was under the impression that this is going to be a final, or at least more final, outline where it will be guaranteed the end of the war when this particular phase is over, with 10 Israeli hostages who are alive to be released, 20 bodies or so, perhaps 15 bodies out of the 30 there. And 60 days later, the final chord in the war will be announced. There are some last-minute problems, apparently, in the understandings between the parties, because what President Trump assumed was going to happen was that proximity talks, not only with the mediators, especially Qatar and Egypt, playing a role, but also in close proximity, delegations from Israel and Hamas, probably in Doha, Qatar, and notes being compared back and forth until a formula is agreed upon. Right now, there seems to be a snag. Prime Minister Netanyahu is supposed to go to Washington early next week. Both Trump and Netanyahu apparently hope to be announcing a deal. Right now, it's not certain.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Oren. Colonel Eisen, what Mr. Oren mentioned with regard to the sacrifice that Israel is paying for the ongoing battle in the Gaza Strip against this murderous Islamist terror organization, Hamas, is naturally heartbreaking for all of us and all the people of Israel and supporters of the state. But nonetheless, the casualties while the casualties exist, the first casualty of war, as we know, is truth, since there is much disinformation, misinformation disseminated in the public sphere with plenty of actors seeking to draw a picture that does not necessarily converge with reality, but rather taints Israel time and again. Give us a broader understanding of the complexity at hand.
One of the things that I've seen, and especially since the 12-day campaign between Israel and Iran, is how much we frame the entire conflict in such a different way that even the portion of those 12 days of Israel against the Islamic regime of Iran, it was portrayed as Israel the aggressor. And I put those words on the table right now, Jonathan. This is something that we need to understand, not agree with. But in this case, for the last 21 months, and this started from October 7th, when, as you call them correctly from my point of view, the murderous Hamas organization did that horrific, barbaric attack, from October 7th, 21 months ago, Israel has been depicted as the aggressor in this conflict, as the occupier, as the one who is the one that needs to be doing different things. And that framing has gotten more and more extreme over the last 21 months. And that framing has within it a terminology. And we all understand that, but I'm not sure how much we really see how difficult it is today inside our social media echo chambers to hear a different point of view. And it means that when Israel is portrayed as the aggressor, as the oppressor, as the occupier, with no difference whatsoever between Israel, the Israeli military, between the horrific attack and the taking of the hostages, the whole framing that we talk about is being presented through Israel that is oppressing Palestinians, no mention of the word Hamas. And then you get to the negotiations right now, and it's portrayed here through the eyes of Israel. And we don't negotiate with Hamas, but Israel and that terror organization, the different mediators, as you said, it's on the one hand, United States, on the other hand, Qatar and Egypt. What everybody hears in their ears is that Israel is negotiating with the Palestinians, and we're the aggressor oppressor, and we're the ones who have to stop it. And that is so different from the way that we talk about it, both here on the programs of TV7 that present a full, broad aspect of what's going on, but what happens inside most people's social media feed. And that's what, at the end, changes different opinions. And you can see that out on the street, in the concerts, in the festivals, in the universities, where from that social media feed, after 21 months, they're not looking at this as Israel under attack, the hostages held 21 months, the horrific aspects of Hamas and Israel fighting Hamas. They're looking at it as Israel against the Palestinians.
Indeed. Well, it is a matter of the complex reality in which we are seeing objective truth of what is actually happening in the field, actually going only so far and not reaching into the public sphere, as you call it, within the social media and such, where subjective truths are disseminated and spread out quite vigorously. Of course, one of the major tools that is utilized is, of course, TikTok, from which, at least in the United States, but also in Europe, the majority of young adults between the ages of 18 and 25 are consuming their news. So we are seeing a tool that, of course, is a Chinese tool. It is owned by a Chinese company, and under the Second Amendment of the Constitution of China, every private entity is subject to the rulings and directives of the Communist Party that ultimately directs whatever it sees as its own interests. And unfortunately, right now, within the context of strategic power competition, China sees Israel as an extension of the United States, and therefore tainting Israel and picturing it badly helps it in tainting the United States and further fueling its disinformation on the matter of the Americans, but also Western civilization at large. But returning to the Gaza question, General Sofrin, when we're talking about the ongoing negotiations, which Mr. Olin already characterized quite effectively, I wonder to what degree is the current construct of Hamas from the Politburo situated in Qatar and the field commanders in the Gaza Strip aligned in their purpose with regard to achieving the various goals, since there seems to be somewhat of a disagreement between the two sides?
There's always some disagreement between the leadership in Gaza, who is under fire and under a lot of pressure, and the people that are located in Doha, that live without any pressure, without any fire, without any threat on their existence. And therefore, the point of view is totally different. The people in Doha can say that we have a lot of time. We can go on, drag this process and for a very long time and not get to some point because we are winning, in their point of view, of course. And the people that are under pressure in Gaza and under fire and are what go threat to their own lives are thinking differently, and they're more keen to get to some agreement that will stop the war and enable them, first of all, to survive, and second, to be in control, to stay in control or to maintain the control in Gaza for the next coming years. Even if another regime will be in control in Gaza, they will be there. They won't go anywhere. And therefore, this is another point of view, a different point of view. And there are some disagreement. It was always like that. Even when Yahya Sinwar controlled Gaza and controlled the whole operation in Gaza, he disagreed with Ismail Haniyeh. Both of them are not alive, lucky us. And therefore, it is a different point of view. And of course, there are friction between those two.
Well, thankfully to your colleagues, rather than luck, has brought about the desired outcome with regard to those murderous individuals, and it's objective, to say the least. But Mr. Olin, let's redivert our attention to Lebanon, where the Turkish ambassador to Turkey, Ambassador Barak, is expected to travel to Beirut to continue discussions with President Joseph Aoun and others. It seems like the former deputy envoy to the Middle East, who was quite vigorous in seeing about a new Lebanon, has been replaced now with a Turkish ambassador who is also in charge of the Syrian portfolio and is quite vigorous in his approach there. He has the ear of President Donald Trump, it seems, and therefore there is a certain movement right now in the direction that may or may not be favorable to Israel.
Well, President Trump is anything but your run-of-the-mill leader. His routine is unlike no other. And rather than test the sincerity of the Ashara administration's intentions by deeds, he turned diplomacy on its head and paid him in advance, the sort of cash and carry diplomacy. First of all, removing the sanctions, including the designation of Ashara himself and Tahrir Asham organization from the terror list, giving the confidence that Ashara brought with him to his government another sort of leeway. In fact, only Bashar Assad's circle remains under sanctions. Even certain divisions of the Syrian army, the 1st Division and the 5th Division and other units which General Sofrin remembers so well from his time across from the line of separation, even the divisions were taken off the list. So this is a leap of faith for President Trump. Now, he has been known to change his view 180 degrees. He could be disappointed and immediately turn against Ashara. But right now, what you described is the administration's position vis-a-vis vis-a-vis Damascus. Now, whether you wanted to remind us of that or not, let me just add to the activities of the IDF what happened overnight with the foiling of a terror plot by an Iranian affiliated cell or squad across from the Golan Heights. The division operating there under the IDF, along with intelligence interrogators, managed to uncover the plot and the cell and arrest these Iranian proxies.
Indeed, Iranian-backed militants that were apprehended by 504, of course, and other operators conducting a very important job. Colonel Eisen, it seems like the Iranians, despite being pushed back, are not giving up on Syria. They understand the strategic value of this country.
The fact that they're not giving up on Syria is because they're not giving up on Hezbollah, and they need to find the way in. And right now, they're having a difficulty coming in the front door into Lebanon, something they did not have a difficulty in the last 15 years, and that's a huge change in Lebanon. They're having the difficulty inside Iran, but inside Syria. But inside Syria, at the end, you have a land border, not with Iran. From Iran, you have to go through Iraq. From Iraq, you have to go through to get to Syria. But that is a massive open space. People should go look on the map. It is a very large arena where you can come in, if it's from Iran into Iraq, from Iraq into Syria. But I want to remind everybody that in the years before, HTS and the other conglomerates of different capabilities ousted horrific Bashar al-Assad. I'm not going to say that Bashar al-Assad was anything but bad, but before he was ousted, the Shiites, the Iranians, and lots of other ones were really changing the demography, both in the Syrian Golan opposite us, in the area of Damascus. And one of the things that I'm saying happening right now is both Ahmed Shara, to the good and to the bad, is trying to change that again. But there are right now, in Syria, on the Golan Heights, Shiites, both Syrian and non-Arabic speaking, that very much feel that it was Iran that sent them there, that supported them, that they were for the Bashar. And so, yes, Iran is going to continue to try to do so. They're going to continue to try to destabilize. They're not out of the fight. Having said that, they were heavily hurt. But now they're showing where their priorities are, and that priority is still there. The proxies, one of the ways to get them is through Syria, and of course at the end to attack Israel.
Indeed. Well, General Sofrin, this reality is, of course, still evolving. Nevertheless, we do see a certain situation in which the Iranians are looking at the manner in which they have sustained the last war with Israel, namely the 12 days war, in which they are still ongoing or undergoing a certain battle damage assessment to fully comprehend the degradation that they experienced. All the while, we do hear now the commander of Iran's armed forces, namely the ground forces specifically, saying that from their perspective, the most strong component in their military is the ground forces, and that is part of their goal to utilize that also against the state of Israel. Now, we're familiar, of course, about the aspirations to destabilize Jordan and to really bring about the downfall of King Abdullah II and his royal court in order to then invade Jordan and establish an eastern front against Israel's longest land border. Is that a reality that is still being closely monitored for potential, evolution of such an offensive?
Jonathan, in Iran, there are what we call two armed entities. The first one is what we call the regular army or the armed forces that has a specific role of what we call securing the borders of Iran. That's it, no more than that. They don't have what they call attacking capabilities They don't maintain such capabilities. They don't train. They don't have enough equipment. And the distance between Israel and Iran, of course, is so big, is so large that they cannot cross over Iraq or Syria and get into Israel to engage Israelis directly. What is the most important entities in Iran is what we call the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, that has most of the assets of the regime, meaning the ballistic missiles. They are responsible for the nuclear capabilities. They maintain what we call naval capabilities, attacking naval capabilities that can cause many problems in the Strait of Hormuz and other capabilities as well. And if you refer to what we call the ground forces of the armed forces of Iran, I don't see them even capable of carrying out such an attack. It's only what we call to say that beware because we are intending to do so. And if we speak about Jordan, they will try to destabilize Jordan not by themselves, by proxies that will be operated or activated from Syria to the Jordanian border and try to destabilize the country.
Indeed. Well, it was nonetheless important for you to mention those things because many people are unaware of Iran's capabilities, and there's a lot of rhetoric, to save face, so to speak, by the Iranians after what they've experienced in the last 12-day war between Israel and Iran, namely Operation Rising Lion, as it's called here in Israel. Mr. Oren, just in the last 24 hours, there was yet again a ballistic missile shot from Yemen, something that, of course, caught many people by surprise, since they said, who would expect the Yemenis to raise their head after the devastation that the Iranians have experienced under the last war. What can you tell us about that, considering the fact that Defense Minister Israel Katz was quite vigorous in his verbal response?
Yes, Mr. Katz is always very vigorous verbally. It remains to be seen whether the Yemenites will be deterred by it. Up to now, they have not been swayed by whatever announcements they heard from Tel Aviv. But be it as it may, between mid-March and late April, there was this campaign that the Americans, CENTCOM, conducted against the Houthis, and it ended with a ceasefire agreement in which the Houthis did not promise to hold their fire unless the target was American. If it is a European one, an Egyptian one, an Israeli one, or the landmass of Israel, they are free to do whatever they want. Now, during the Israeli-Iranian exchange of missiles and bombs, the Houthis quite wisely refrained from launching missiles because it would have been a drop in the ocean. So many missiles were lobbed at Israel that an additional one or two wouldn't have made a dent anywhere. Now that Israel and Iran are having a ceasefire, the Houthis want to remind us all that they are still there, that they are still maintaining their blockade of Bab el-Mandeb, that no Israeli shipping can go to and from the port of Eilat. And therefore, even though the missile itself caused no damage except for the alert, which was heard in Jerusalem and vicinity this time around, nevertheless, the problem must be taken care of. Up to now, whatever Israel did, bombing the port of Hodeidah or the airport in Sana'a or wherever, did not help. So apparently, Air Force units per se will not be enough. Israel has other forces for such contingencies.
Indeed. Well, it is important to highlight that the Houthis are faced with a new dilemma, considering the fact that much of the dual-use components that were smuggled from Iran through Djibouti to Yemen have now undergone a new obstacle, and that is the United Nations, under immense U.S. pressure, has brought about a UN decision to start really canvassing each cargo, meaning that they're going to go into each cargo that gets to Djibouti and then sent to Yemen for humanitarian purposes in order to check whether or not there are dual-use components there for the Houthi ballistic missile capabilities. And from what I hear from CENTCOM, it's being quite successful, since many of those containers are being found and then confiscated. So that is at least some good news. Half a sentence each. What are we need, or what should we focus on for the next 48 hours? Colonel Eisen, we'll start with you.
The Houthis are going to fire more missiles. In Israel, we're going to have an endless debate about what happened, what didn't happen, and especially speculation about what's going to happen next week in the United States. None of us really know. We're all waiting for that.
General Sofrin?
I think that we have to keep an open eye on Iran, because the Iranians are now working on Fordow to try to understand what really happened there, what kind of damage was caused to this facility. Now, take into consideration that President Pezeshkian just this morning announced that they are going to cease the cooperation with the IAEA. And even though it's not decided and not authorized or approved by the Supreme Leader, this is what we call a declaration that has its own meaning. And if it's going to really be implemented, it's a huge problem, and nobody can really understand what is really going in Iran regarding the nuclear capabilities.
Absolutely. It is a very early step. Of course, it still needs to go through the Supreme National Security Council, and from there, after they recommend it to the Supreme Leader, he makes the decision. We'll have to wait and see. But unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank General Sofrin, Colonel Eisen, and Mr. Olen for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
I'm Eran Etzion, former Deputy National Security Advisor here in Israel, a diplomat, a strategist by training. I'm very happy to be at TV7 and offer my interpretation along my esteemed colleagues. The strong point of TV7 is to be a reliable source of authoritative insight in an era of shallow news environment that is very difficult for viewers to trust.